This is going to be me talking about my experience in the Pioneer mocks and my deck. I definitely wanted to talk about that, but I was hoping to do it in written form, but my attempts to do that didn't really pan out because I keep trying to tie it into a larger framework of how I approach Magic and this stuff in general, but it's doesn't sound too good. I'm not a fan of it, how it's coming along, and I don't want to put off making this too long because a large part of the appeal to me is having a snapshot, a good clear snapshot into an earlier version of myself, right? Like the video I made after I played my first Pioneer mocks where I ended up 9th. Gone back and watched that a number of times, and it's interesting. Some of the PT video, less so with the showcase video, where I qualified for this showcase. And the articles I've written, I don't know, it's just I find it pretty interesting. So I don't want to be too far removed from the mental state of having qualified. And there's some other stuff going on, so I'm pretty likely to get distracted and forget about it because my initial attempt at writing an article, as I said, didn't really pan out. So I qualified, not in the last season, I qualified in the second to last season, so I had quite a bit of time to spare for preparation. I qualified with Phoenix. I felt really, really good about my deck at the time. I had cut Thin Ice based on input from Daniel and Stefan, and I just felt like I had a huge edge on the field. And I lost in, what was it, top 4 or top 8? To, I think, top 4 to Pardion Jund in a wacky game where it ended up coming down to him casting Fatal Push off the top of the deck with Citadel, being able to pay for Ward on a Hull of Storm Giants when I otherwise would have had lethal. I think a number of my Phoenixes got milled over with the pieces, and he hit them with a Crypt, and it was kind of a grind for me to get out of that position. But I feel like I could have won, I lost, but I ended up walking away very happy with my deck and happy to have qualified and had a lot of time to prepare. Unlike, say, the last Pioneer Showcase for me, where I got there in an LCQ. Hard to say how impactful that is, but it's beneficial in at least some ways, right? And then where does this place on the timeline of me playing Pioneer at Indianapolis? I did put a decent amount of effort into, I guess, relearning Pioneer before Indianapolis, because I was like watching my stats, and I was playing the most of Legacy and winning the most at Legacy, where Pioneer was not going too great for me, so I put a focused effort into that. Well, that was definitely before this showcase, obviously. I'm not sure if that happened before or after I qualified for the showcase. I think after. So yeah, I put a decent amount of effort into getting good at Pioneer again as best I could. But a lot of that was also just me playing prelims. I don't know. Nothing, yeah, I didn't do anything too crazy. When the last showcase wrapped up, I posted on Twitter asking if there was anybody who wanted to work with me, and that yielded 2 responses. One of which was Lucas, who had qualified with Blue White Yorion, right? I think he was the one who reached out to me. And Binu, who I thought was qualified because I have a lot of respect for him, but then he thought I was talking about preparing for the LCQs, so I kicked him from the server. And then I was sort of, I guess, hoping that more people would reach out, but then nobody really did. apart from Lucas, so I started reaching out myself. I reached out to Nathan, I reached out to Canister, I reached out to Part D. Then when JMM qualified, I reached out to JMM. Was somebody else in the server? Am I missing one person? I might be missing one person, but I can also just pull it up, probably. Nathan, JMM, Canister, Lucas, and Party. Yeah, okay. So, a number of them were pretty straight up about the fact that they wouldn't have much time to play, but the amount of play ended up going below anything I would have expected, and in the end it was really me and Nathan working on the side, and Tangrams hopped in our server at the last minute when he won an LCQ, but he was playing a different deck. It didn't seem too likely that he was going to switch. I mean, I played a few sets versus him, but really it was just me and Nathan working on Phoenix. Out of people qualified, of course, on the side, Daniel and Stefan still had a huge input. I think I had a fine approach. Like, I was really scared of Lotus. I felt like I didn't have a good understanding of it. So I played a decent amount of reps against Nam and Isaac, and then I tried to talk to people about what they expect the likelihood of Lotus comboing from certain positions is, to better inform tapping out on your turn versus not doing that. Because, like, you're making those calls on the fly in game anyway. So I wanted to try and map that out in advance. And I felt like I fixed some holes in my understanding of the matchup. Like, I was lower on reversal initially than I should have been, because I was mostly just thinking about countering distortion, but countering Pour is quite good as well, countering Ultimatum, and then has some equity in the mirror. So I fixed those holes as best I could. I didn't really end up feeling great about my understanding of the red-black matchup, because I didn't really get to play too much against the deck, but I talked the night before the event with Nathan about boarding, and in general, what his understanding of it was sort of, like, it's clear that you have to board out of this combo-adjacent plan into something more binge-rangey, right? But I didn't feel great about the multipliers I was assigning to how things would play out against black-red. Specifically against mid-range, because Sacrifice seems more straightforward. And I think I adjusted quite a bit down on attacking with Phoenixes against Sacrifice. Something someone said in a call at some point really stuck with me about, oh, it seems like you can race, but then you realize you can't actually race, and that few points of chip damage you took early on end up losing you the game. And I mostly, I was just attacking with Phoenixes a lot less. So that was preparation. Phoenix in general. Oh, well, so I want to talk about the deck as a separate component from my experience, but they're so intertwined. I guess I'll hold off on talking about No Thing Nice and more broad points about the deck till later. So that, I guess, covers most of the experience of preparation. I went for a run the night before, and I went to sleep pretty early. I woke up well in advance. I had some oatmeal. Had some oatmeal like during the middle of round 1. I think I still had oatmeal on the stove. Yeah, but I was in fine shape. Like, I exercised a bit more than I otherwise would have over the week. I got a bit more sleep than I otherwise would have. I paid a bit more attention to consistently eating, so I was in not too bad of a shape. My round 1 opponent was McQuinsauce, who ended up being on mono red. I kept a hand with something like Charticourse pieces and a Phoenix and some lands, I think, something along those lines in game 1. And then he was on the play. and I just lost to him being on mono red. Game 2, I'm not sure how I won. Game 3, it got to a weird position where I put him to 8 health with 2 phoenixes in play, and I top decked a hull, and then I just made no attacks and passed. No, I think I messed up. I think I attacked a Chandra when I shouldn't have attacked, because I think that actually gave him more outs. So I remember thinking that was a mistake. But the card I drew and I needed to draw a live spell was a hull. So I got the hull down as an attacker. So then he didn't really have a good attack with his Bone Crusher. He attacked with the Den of the Bugbear. I blocked, and then I top decked like pieces into some live spells, got Phoenixes back and killed. That was round 1. I could have very easily lost round 1. Like, I was quite lucky there. And the matchup isn't great. Then, round 2, I played against May on Fires. In game 1, I Spell Pierced to Fires on curve. No, I Spell Pierced to Fires on turn 5, I think, actually. I was really trying to leave up the Spell Pierce pretty aggressively for the Fires. I think I drew it early, or maybe I had it in my opener. Just because they're so much less scary without Fires. So I did that, and then they kind of died. And then game 2, I think he posted on Twitter saying he kept a bad hand. And it seems like that was the case because he sort of just didn't do anything and then died. But he also conceded while maybe being alive. So he was pretty behind though. So that was weird, but at that point I was 2-0, feeling pretty good. Then I played red-black. All the red-black matches sort of mush together. I'm not too used to like distinguishing between sack and mid-range. I think it was mid-range. I'm not super sure what happened there either, but then I was 3-0. And then I think I played red-black again, and I was 4-0. And then I was playing... So at that point I was locked. At 3-0 my breakers were really bad, so I felt like I still had to win one more. But at 4-0 I was locked for top 8. So I was feeling good, like 3 more games, all that stuff. It wasn't on my radar at that time that a lot of the other people already were qualified, so potentially it would be 2 games, which ended up being the case. I was thinking to myself, 3 games, I can do that. My coin flips are probably pretty good. I was stressed. My stomach was hurting, but in general I wasn't feeling too bad. Tristan messaged me and he was like, some general encouragement, which was appreciated. And all throughout I was talking in a messenger chat with Zoomers, which I probably shouldn't have been doing. I mean, I definitely shouldn't have been, but I was pretty stressed and I was trying to minimize that. Well, no, I wasn't actually doing that during games in the earlier rounds. It was when I was playing in Top Cut that I started doing it because, I was really stressed out at that point. But I lost round 5. I played against red-black again, and I was in a weird mind space because Nathan said he needed me to win. Otherwise, I would have just conceded to hide my deck. But I was also trying to show as few cards as possible, and this put me in a weird headspace where I wasn't super focused on just winning the game, and I think I played pretty poorly. But I also mulliganed. I mulliganed to 5 twice, so maybe that was a big part of it as well. That was definitely a big part of it. But I was 4-1 going into top 8, so I paired into red-black. It was actually a rematch against the same person I just lost to. At this point in time, having played the red-black matchup 3 times, they were on sacrifice, yeah? Yeah, they were on sacrifice. And then, they were on sacrifice, and next round was someone on mid-range. But I felt fine about the matchup. I sort of thought that I had figured things out. We had the tablet. If we ever find tablet, they're sort of just dead. And we had a pretty robust boarding plan. I wasn't scared of the deck and thought I was favored. And I beat them. I milled over a tablet in game 3, which was sad, and I thought I would maybe going to lose. Oh, it was actually a really insane game, because I ended up being super, super down on clock, Well, they were low on clock too, but I was still down like 4 minutes, and I was sub a minute, I think sub 30 seconds when I finally won. I took a line, I was holding up Otawara to protect my Jace. I don't even know what I was playing around, like Murderous Rider or something, because realistically they were just dead, but I forgot to... I used a bunch of mana to cast a Temporal Trespass when I should have used more Delve Count, and tapped out of Otawara, and that gave them a window to maybe kill the Jace and kill me. But that didn't happen, so then I killed with Jace. And then I played Red-Black. Again, for most of this I knew what my opponents were on. Facing this opponent, I knew they were on Red-Black mid-range. So I won game 1. I posted like a screenshot of me using Fiery Impulse to discard a Phoenix against a Graveyard Trespasser, and then attack with 2 Phoenixes. They just died pretty straightforwardly to some pretty fast Phoenixes. Game 2, I got soloed by a Trespasser. I had a Fiery Impulse in hand that I just never got a window to convert into killing the Trespasser, and the way the day-night lined up for me wasn't great. I kept feeling like there was something I could have done, and I'll go back and watch the games. I still haven't really done that, and I definitely should. Or maybe it doesn't matter, because Pioneer doesn't really matter for me for a while, but... Anyways, so I got soloed by a Trespasser, went into game 3, and then I saw my opener was... My opener... My opener was this. So I felt like I was just going to win. I was on the play with this hand, and then I did win. They Bone Crushed the first Pyromancer, then I played out the second. They didn't have an answer, they cast Bone Crusher, and then I cast some spells and won off the back of Pyromancer, really. I ended up, it was kind of nice. It wasn't necessary at all, but they played a Kalitas, and I ended up auto-warring back to their hand to have exact lethal. I would have killed them later on too, but it was kind of nice. And that meant that I qualified for the PT, which was really exciting. And Nathan and Tangrams were playing in the other side of the bracket. I was, I think, pretty happy to have dodged them both. Not that I was really scared of the mirror, or that I was scared of Winota, but both felt close, and I think I would rather play... I would definitely rather play the red-black matchup against some random guys than the mirror or Winota against someone I know to be really good, right? And their match dragged on forever. Nathan posted screenshots of that afterwards. He was at 1 life when he won. Really insane game. Or was he on no cards in the library? Something along those lines, but either way it was a 6-6 game that he somehow won. And then I was gonna play a mirror, which was weird. It's hard for me to say where I stand in respect to Nathan in the mirror. I would be inclined to give myself like a tiny edge, like 52%, 53%, something. But maybe that's me, because I've played a lot more than him, right? But he's generically much better than me, and I haven't actually played that many mirrors. Back when I was playing a lot of mirrors, it was first of all with an older version of the deck, and second of all, I was winning just off the back of maximum greeting Temporal Trespass because my opponent didn't realize I think you were supposed to be doing that. Or maybe I'm not crediting my opponents enough, but either way, it didn't really feel like there was a ton of play to that. And especially this sort of game where you're boarding into Pyromancers and Spell Pierces, right? The count of Mystical Disputes went down, but because you're on more Spell Pierces and Reversals, the total count of blue interaction went up. So it's a lot more grindy now. I don't think I'm not favored. I think I'd give myself like that range of like 50 to 53 or something along those lines. But maybe, I mean, I'd be prepared to believe like 48 to 50, 48 to 52. I don't know. I think it's very close, probably. Seems hard to say. But anyway, the way things worked out, I ended up winning. I ended up getting a win and qualified for the MOX, so that's pretty sick. Yeah, it was weird because that's something that I had as a goal for a long time, obviously, right? I had died in a number of previous showcases, and at that point in time I would have just killed to have scratched out an extra win, right? Like in Legacy I was 3-2, ended up scooping to max, so I ended up 2-3, but I had him, he was just dead when I scoop because his breakers were better than mine. And I would have killed to have had an extra win, so I could have 4-1'd and battled in top 8. And in Pioneer, the very first Pioneer I played, I ended up 9th off the back of a 3-2, but my last round pairing was against Zach Dunn at 1-3 at that point, right? Yeah, I got the pair down, and then I barely missed on breakers, so I didn't even really get a chance to quote-unquote play for it. Yeah. What happened in the one I played with Phoenix? I think it was also a 3-2, but not like 9th, a bit further down. Like 11th, something along those lines. My breakers, they were just horrendous all throughout the event. And I sort of knew I was dead at like 1-2 or something, but then I won the next two, I believe. And I would have killed for an extra win in all of these. Where here I had that extra win, and already my mind was going to like, oh, you know, you played 6 rounds of Magic, what does it matter? When previously it would have been, oh, just 6 rounds, you should have won one more, right? What are you doing? And it's kind of crazy how fast that go-post shifts in a way that doesn't necessarily seem like it's healthy or good, but I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing about that. Because I think always having that be further away from where you are is a big part of what I enjoy about Magic, right? Because the goalposts are reachable in some sense. I was talking about this, I mean, it's in a lot of ways a cope, because the goalposts in real life or in other more complex systems feel much less reachable than here. But what am I saying? I didn't feel like elated when I qualified for the first PT with Rhinos. I felt elated. I was close to like tears of happiness. I was so very happy. And here this was just like, oh, maybe it's the difference in lengths of the event. It felt like it was less earned. Maybe it's the weirdness of the final round against Nathan. Probably more the latter than anything else. But, I mean, in the end, I'll get a chance to battle at the PT, and I'll get a chance to battle at the MOX, which is exciting, and I'll do my best to do well at that. What else is there to say in that regard? I mean, I'm good at Pioneer, right? But the other thing is, I was in a server with, 5 players much better than me, and none of them really cared. 4 players much better than me, and 1 player that I don't know how to evaluate too well. But none of them really cared, right? If they did care, they could have done so much better, and I don't really stand a chance. And even in my day of facing a metric ton of red-black, I didn't face JMM on red-black, I dodged him all day, right? I don't even know, was he on red-black? He might have ended up being on mono-red in the end? No, I think the person on mono-red was Pardee. I just knew everyone's decks, is what I'm saying, but it mixes together. But does that matter, right? Because, again, sitting on the opposite side of that, when I'm at a big disadvantage because I haven't played as much as other people historically, I just see that as a handicap to overcome, right? I don't think it's... like, I don't get points because of having been playing the game for less than my opponents, right? And here, maybe I'm supposed to be saying that they don't get points, or I shouldn't lose points for that. But I do get that feeling, which again is maybe a problem, right? Because you can't, well, you can because I do it, but it's hard to say all your losses, you can always blame yourself, right? But your wins, it's hard to say if it's you or if it's something else, right? Because the wins, the losses, you could have always done something else, right? But in the wins, it's so hard, and I don't really know what to say. But in the end, I'm happy to have qualified, and excited to take a stab at it, really. Like the PT, it's insane to me. I don't know, I have like one very clear offer for a team to work with, and one like prospective offer that's sort of a mess that's not clear to me what's going on with. But even the one that's like clearly on the table in front of me, what the hell? How do I have? Well, I know how I have that. It's through connections to Zoomers. But it's crazy to me that that's an option available to me, and I'm happy about that. But anyway, I guess I can talk about the deck more now. I think that covers most of the experience. Holy shit, that's 26 minutes. Well, whatever. I'll get it off my conscience. So, what are the notable parts of this? There's a few distinct components. One simple one to touch on is Alpine Moon. I was very scared of Lotus, because if the field is locked to have 2 Lotus people, and I'm very prepared to believe that we actually end up with no more than 4. Like, I expect a range of 2 to 4. But if that hits the top of that range, and you play against any of them, or maybe you play against them twice because you might play them in Swiss and Top Cut, or something along those lines, right? Just the extra piece of hate is a huge amount of equity. And I also feel like I was playing games against Nam, where at first I was wrecking him with Reversal, but then he started playing Sphinx of the whatever, Forgotten something, the Hexproof, your spells can't be countered guy. The can't be countered, Hexproof, your spells can't be countered guy, and more disputes. And the Reversal got a lot worse, and I felt like if Nam reached that conclusion, I would expect Fnoop to reach that conclusion, and maybe whoever else plays the deck to also do that. So I felt like I couldn't rely on them so much, and I just really wanted a third piece of hate. So I played to the Alpine Moon. The Tablet of the Guilds just solos the game versus Red-Black, really. Feels hard for me to justify 2 more. I think the second is what got cut from Nathan's list to fit in the Alpine Moon at my input. How do you say that? At my request? Not request. There was a better word I was thinking of, but it's gone out of my head. The Jaces are really solid. The Chandra, like I would be pretty interested in playing a 3rd Jace, but it just ends up being awkward. And Chandra is sort of another Jace that dodges Legendary Rule, gives you some unique angles. I won 1 game through a Chandra Ultimate, which was cool. The Pyromancers are still a big question mark for me. They're obviously very good. How I first found the Pyromancers is, well, I think looking back at Goldfish lists, people actually had them before me, but that wasn't really why I was playing them. Before Indianapolis, I compiled a huge document of alternative threat options for Phoenix. Because again, all of them sort of suck. It's been very clear to me for a while that you have to board into, you just have to have those alternative threats, because your main plan becomes so much worse into a huge amount of different things. But all of them sort of suck. And for a while, what I was very high on was was Monastery, Swift Spear. But at Indianapolis, I didn't draw Swift Spear so much, and I drew Pyromancer a lot, and Pyromancer was good. And then I had some events I was playing. There was like a PTQ, right? And I played another showcase with the deck without much testing. So just based on that evidence, I felt like I was supposed to adjust towards playing more Pyromancers, and then Pyromancer kept being great for me, and then other people playing Pyromancer also said it was great for them, and the Swift Spear sort of got left by the wayside, but it's not necessarily clear to me that Swift Spear is bad. The logic is like, well, the logic behind Swift Spear was you want to force answers at the cheapest possible price, but Pyromancer, I guess, forces better answers, kind of, because a lot of the time a single removal spell isn't actually that good against it, right? Where it is going to be good against Swift Spear. So they're sort of playing on different angles, because with the Swift Spear you're going to say, oh, they spent more mana killing this than I spent playing it, and I was like generating passive value through it with prowess triggers, and that maybe gives me a window to accomplish something else that they can't cleanly answer. Where Pyromancer it's going to be harder for them to answer this in general. And boarding in 3 versus 4, it feels nice. Like, boarding in 4 feels awkward. I was talking about this yesterday too. But you are so happy to have one on turn 2 or turn 3. Maybe turn 3 with like a Spell Pierce backup, even better than turn 2. That maybe you're just supposed to play 4. And I still don't know what's right there. Like, I was pretty interested in playing 4, and I ended up listening to Nathan, who was playing 3. Just because I have a lot of respect for him, right? And my impressions are sort of inbred, and I was feeling pretty weird about the deck, so I was just like, I'm going to trust what is being said and play 3. But if someone... It's not... I don't think it's far from playing 4. I'm like 50-50 on which is correct. The Spell Pierce is just very good. You're pretty happy with it everywhere. I think I was playing 2 post-board in every matchup, and 3 in a lot of them. And again, it's sort of a similar story, where boarding in 4 feels awkward, but maybe it's just good enough that you want 4. But that's less close than the Pyromancer. Pyromancer is closer to the 4 than Spell Pierce is. Reversal is just Lotus Hate, which you can also play in the mirror. Dispute is like a diversified version of Pierce, kind of. The Jaces are obviously good. The Treasure Cruise is sort of interesting. What you're doing with Delve spells in general is pretty interesting. I was advocating for 3 Trespasses in the main for a hot minute, and a lot of people weren't really buying that, but it kept feeling good to me. A large driver for that, though, was Phoenix Mirrors, where having the first one, because you had an extra one in deck, it was much easier to burn it, rather than having to hold it for forever to use it as a win the game piece. You could extract marginal value from it. Or not marginal, but still. You just had a copy to burn. It gave you a lot of equity in the mirror. And I didn't expect a lot of mirrors going into the showcase, which was correct. So I was pretty interested in going back to 2-2-2 split, 2 Galves, 2 Treasure Cruises, 2 Trespasses in the main. But then again, Nathan, after playing a decent amount, and Nathan played more versus red-black than I did, so that's another pretty big reason for why I was willing to trust what he was saying. He said he did want the 3 Trespasses, and then the Cruises, it just gets a lot better post-board, while Trespass gets worse post-board. So that's the reason for this Delve config. The Shatter Skull Smashing is, I'm pretty sure, just good. It's hard to say. Well, the 3 life is real. But I think, well, it's definitely worse. It's less of a downside in the matchups where it's a downside than an upside in the matchups where it's an upside, because a big part of that is pieces, right? You can just not take it if you don't want it, where in the matchups where you do want it, it's very nice. Yeah, you just see so many cards that you can find it in the matchups where you want it and not find it in the matchups where you don't, basically. But the reason to play it is that it's a land you can hit off pieces of the puzzle. Then I was very high on Play with Fires going into this. I was trending up and up on that number, but we wanted to fit a Spell Pierce into the main. And then I ended up deciding that I wanted a Flame Blessed Bolt to answer Voice of Resurgence, because I was getting kind of scared of Winota, and specifically Voice of Resurgence out of Winota. So I ended up playing 0 Play with Fires and 1 Flame Blast Bolt. But in general, Play with Fire is very good if you're not playing Spell Pierce, or if you don't have a reason to expect a lot of Winota, you should play with Fire. Just more consistency for getting your Phoenixes back in the matchups where you're removal is not otherwise alive, and the scry comes up a decent amount as well. Is that everything? I think that might be everything. No, thingy nice. Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this before. When Stefan first pitched it to me, well, not pitched it, described it, I guess, I was like, oh, yeah, that sort of makes sense. Like, one of my first initial reactions was, I've had concerns about thingy nice for a while. And it's strange to me that there are people who have played a lot of the deck who don't feel that. It's just very awkward and not very consistent. And it's going to be good in some games, but in a lot of those games you're going like Galvanic Iteration Trespass, and do you really need to bounce their board and hit them for 7? Like, you're probably going to win anyways, right? And people kept telling me I needed it versus Winota. I'm not sure how true that is. The Winota configs, they got better, right? So the matchup got worse. But now we're boarding into Pyromancers, and I still don't really feel like we're too weak into Winota. I think the consistency with which they outgrind us is pretty greatly exaggerated, so I don't feel like I need it there. I was considering going back to it for a minute, because I got very scared of mono red, but then the matchup got better, or maybe it was always pretty close and I figured out how to play it better, and we started playing a tablet, and thingy nice still kind of sucks in a lot of other matchups. It's hard to describe. It's just, I think the core description of it is that it adds a lot of variance where you don't necessarily need that. Where you're otherwise a very, very consistent deck, but playing thingy nice and then having it be killed with like one counter on it is where you lose a lot of games, and you sort of don't need to take that risk. And for whatever it's worth, like everyone I've talked to about it has come around on it, right? Like Nathan came around on it, all the Zoomers that have been playing my versions of the list think it's good. I think, well, all that's the ones that I've been talking to, maybe some of them are playing it that don't like it. But people I respect that I have talked to about the deck and that have tried both versions, I think by and large agree on no thing, which gives me some confidence. I mean, Daniel won a PTQ with no thing, right? Then me and Nathan were in the finals of this, and then just consistently, I've been doing pretty good with it. But hard to say how much that's worth. I'd still give like 5% probably to thingy nice being correct, but I don't think it is. And I think that really is everything there is to say. But is there anything obvious I'm missing? Oh, sideboarding. Sideboarding, huh? Yeah, well, I realized in the, 2 weeks before this event that actually I'm not cutting Chartacourse nearly as much as I should be, and that especially becomes clear once you're boarding in a stack of Pyromancers, because you're injecting this set of 2-drops, and it's awkward having that many. In some ways, Chartacourse is good with Pyromancer, but in a lot of ways you don't really need that extra card, and it's sort of nice having to discard a Phoenix anyway. And then the stack of 2-drops does get awkward. So that was the main driver for me realizing you can be cutting Chartacourses, and then I realized, wait, once I'm cutting Chartacourses, my Phoenixes are getting worse. So I started pretty aggressively cutting Phoenixes, and in the end I mostly scaled back on that and wasn't cutting more than 1 in any matchup, I think. But that's something that was like why eye-opening to me, something that I'd by and large completely missed before. But what I'll do is I'll attach a link to an Imgur album with my sideboarding plans to the description of this video. And now I think that's it.